Deși par născuți din iubire și pentru iubire, copiii acestei lumi sunt departe de a fi aliniați unui drum al fericirii. Unii vin pe lume în familii cu o situație excelentă, dar nu o parte de armonie familială. Alții sunt foarte săraci, dar își cresc pruncii într-o siguranță parentală. Cresc cu toții, dar unii înfruntă mai greu dificultățile. Abuzul emoțional asupra copilului poate interveni în orice context și este un comportament inadecvat, deseori inconștient față de acesta, cu efecte negative asupra personalității copilului aflat în formare. Un copil sănătos poate fi rănit de proprii părinți sau de dascăli, de colegi sau de anturaj, prin cuvinte și comportamente alese greșit. El se va închide în lumea lui, manifestând respingere, izolare, umilire, criticare, refuzul de a comunica. În extrema cealaltă, la copilul bolnav, cu o suferință psihică sau alte dizabilități, tot comunicarea este una dintre principalele probleme. Pe lângă comportamentele specifice și efectele de relaționare și gândire, un copil autist, de exemplu, trebuie ajutat și stimulat să depășească toate barierele de exprimare. Înainte de a te adresa unui autist, trebuie să reflectezi și să te informezi foarte bine asupra ceea ce înseamnă autismul și particularitățile lui. Deși văzul și auzul copilașilor autiști pot funcționa normal, ei au probleme în organizarea informațiilor și în punerea lor într-un anume context. Micuții trăiesc furtuni senzoriale deranjante, înfricoșătoare și uneori dureroase. Pare că nimeni nu poate ajunge să le descifreze mintea și sufletul, tocmai de aceea am fost fascinată să aflu că în România sunt multe persoane care își dedică energia pentru a contribui la o existență confortabilă pentru acești oropsiți ai sorții. Voluntari sau angajați în procesul de îngrijire, cei dornici să ajute învață de la specialiști folosirea unor sisteme alternative de comunicare, cum ar fi PEX, limbajul cu pictograme. Andy, welcome in my world, because in the beginning I was in your world with what you do, and now I want to describe to the people in my program what means PEX.
PEX is the Picture Exchange Communication System, and it's a system that we developed over 20 years ago in the United States to help children who are having trouble learning to speak and communicate in any way. And it starts with teaching the children to give us a single picture in a situation in which we have something they like. So I might hold out a toy and there might be a single picture of that toy in front of the child. And while he's reaching for it, someone else would help him actually pick up a picture and give that to me. And what we found was that started an interaction. Instead of the child just reaching for things or looking at pictures, he would do something to us. And that was the beginning of communication for those children.
So for how long children need to use PEX close to the teacher to open their normal behavior, to communicate with parents and with teachers?
Well, what we found by working initially with very young children was that when the children typically had maybe 80 to 100 pictures, most of the very young children started to speak and continued learning more about speech. And most of the children did not continue with pictures. There were a few children who always had trouble with speech development. So some of those children went from using pictures in a communication book to maybe an electronic system that could have a much bigger vocabulary.
Parents love so much their children, but they don't know how to transmit correct for them this love. How we can do the best for our children in communication?
Well, in communication, it's important to think about why is the child going to communicate with us. And in general, there are two reasons. In some situations, children communicate to let us know they want something. They want a toy, they want a cookie, they want a hug.
Very often we see they want too much, they start to scream, and
yes, and
parents, you know, they don't know what to do.
Well, often we see them screaming because they're not very effective in getting the message across. So for me, I think that many children think that we are not very smart. The child thinks it's obvious, I want the toy behind you, but he doesn't have words to say that. So he gets very frustrated, and then the parents get very frustrated.
So PEX is for the children or for the parents?
It's for both.
For
it's
both.
to make the communication much more direct. That is, the parents always understand the picture. That's easy for the parents. And then the children go from using a single picture to making little sentences, I want cookie, to I want big cookie. And so we're always trying to help them be more expressive. Tell me more about what you want. And then eventually we try to teach them about the other part of language, which is just having a conversation. Oh, I see you have a pretty tie. Oh, I like your hair. And that's a very different kind of speech, and some of our children have trouble learning that. But again, PEX can help them learn to do it in a very simple way, and then gradually learn more and more advanced skills.
Did you ever meet a child who couldn't open his mind and to communicate, a very, very close child?
It's usually more of an issue of me trying to figure out what does this child like. Sometimes it's hard on me. Am I paying enough attention to what he's reaching for, what he's looking at, what he's trying to get away from? So what we have found is we need to be good detectives. I need to study the child and figure out what is he really trying to do. And then I build that into the communication. If I try the other way, if I try, I have milk, you ask me for milk, many of the children will just look and just say, I don't want milk, and it's a bad lesson.
So for the next step, you are here in Bucharest for a very interesting seminar, very good also for parents, for children, for people who wants to help. Speaking by emotion. How we can speak by emotion with children?
Well, part of the seminar is to try to understand what does it mean when we express our emotions. And we try to describe that first children learn to talk about things outside of themselves. That's a chair, that's the floor, there's a camera. Then children learn to start doing things like, my knee hurts, I have a headache, I'm hungry. And what's important to understand is that they learn these simple lessons by us noticing what they're feeling. And then we tell them. So my grandson falls and I pick him up and I say, oh, you hurt your knee. And he goes, yes, Grandpa, hurt knee. And it's very simple, but he's now describing something going on inside. And it starts by me telling him what he's feeling before he can kind of tell me the same thing.
When you're studying language and behavior, how you do this?
Well, when we look at behavior, including things that children say or using other kinds of communication, we try to understand under what situations will a child use a word or use a picture. We might find the child uses a word only when he wants something, whereas another child could also use a word to just comment and have a conversation. We find that some children only speak when we go first. So I have to say cookie, and the child says cookie. Whereas another child, I might be able to just go, what do you want? And he says cookie. And then a third child, he could just walk in and say cookie without any help from us. So even though the children were saying the same word, the situations were different. And that's what we have to study about children. Under what conditions will he say a word or use a picture? Will he understand me? It's a similar issue. If I say, get your ball, if he understands me, he gets the ball and he plays with it. If I say, bring me a spoon, well, then I end up with the spoon and he ends up with, thank you. And for some children, that's not very motivating. So our analysis tries to take a look at what's the behavior we're interested in, what happens before, and what happens after. And in English, we use this phrase for the ABCs, the antecedents, the behavior, and the consequence. And that's a unit. And that's what's hard for people sometimes to always remember. It's that unit that we study.
I also heard you speaking about man and text. If you can continue, because it was the next page in your speech.
Sure. An American psychologist, B.F. Skinner, many years ago wrote a book in which he provides a specific analysis of language. And when he described these ABC units, he would come up with specific terms. So a man, he created the word from the words command or demand. And it's like a request or telling somebody to do something. And the important thing is it leads to a very type of specific outcome. A man for a cookie gets me a cookie. The other kind of word he described, he called it a tact, from the English word contact, making contact with things. He realized that sometimes I might just look at a cookie and go, oh, look, there's a cookie. And my friend says, yes, there's a cookie. And we don't eat the cookie, so we're just talking about the cookie. And Skinner essentially described that these were two different types of language units. And the reason this distinction is important is that young children, for example, with autism, may learn the man, the request, pretty easily, but the tact, the comment, that may be a little bit harder for them to learn.
About verbal communication, because what I heard today seems to me like non-verbal communication, but you describe like it's verbal. What is the difference? Because it's very subtle, this difference.
Yes, the name of the book that Skinner wrote is Verbal Behavior. You know, when he wrote the book back in 1957, very few people used the word verbal. We would talk about speech or talking or communication. So he was actually trying to use a word that was a little novel, a little unique. Now we use the word verbal all over the place. So now we think verbal as meaning speech. But Skinner's use of the word was more like
it's not synonym
language.
with oral. It's different.
No, verbal really is more like language. You know, we can speak English, write in English, sing in English. It's all the same language. But someone else can speak and sing in Romanian and write in Romanian. That's a different language. But both are verbal behavior, whether I'm speaking or I'm writing or I use sign language or I use pictures. Our way of using the word verbal would describe all those different types of communication.
So, by emotion, how we can translate emotion in a communication, because it's not verbal, it's not non-verbal, it's emotion.
Well, the key is that it's very important to get children to talk about what's going on inside. And, as I said, it may start with something as simple as, my knee hurts, I have a headache. Later it becomes a little more sophisticated. I really love this cake. Later it gets even more dramatic. I love you. And the issue is, how do we get children to keep learning these lessons as their life experiences change? For example, teenagers clearly will use the word anxiety in many situations. But we would not teach a 6-year-old to say, I'm anxious. Maybe I'm scared, maybe I'm sad, but the language for a 6-year-old is not going to be the same type of emotional language that a teenager has. So what we're trying to do in this workshop is get teachers to think about how to create lessons in which children have the opportunity to have the feeling and then describe the feeling. So if I give my grandson a piece of cookie and he eats it very quickly, I can tell him, you like this. It's very obvious from what he's doing. If I give him something else and he spits it out, I can say, you don't like that. I know exactly what's happening, not because I'm feeling his feelings, but I can see his behavior, I can see the situation. But because I'm telling him what he's feeling, he can then tell it to me. And later he can expand it to new situations. Grandpa, my elbow hurts, or my chin hurts, I fell, or I like chocolate cake too. And so teachers have to be able to create these opportunities.
Back to the parents, because they are always make mistakes, even if they want to be good all the time. By repeating what we obtain, repeating to the children, I don't know, make your lesson, make your lesson, make your lesson. It's okay to make this with our children if we want to, because it's not a play. It's like you order them to do what you want, what they need.
Well, parents definitely can be teachers, but usually parents take advantage of a situation. We're playing with something, we're playing with crayons. So, okay, let's talk about colors today. Usually parents don't wake up in the morning and say, today he's going to learn green. But parents can structure a lesson and an opportunity to encourage, let's talk about colors. And maybe when they switch to putting away the laundry, let's put the red socks here, and let's put the blue socks there. So now color can become part of a different activity. The problem when parents or teachers repeat something too many times is the children stop listening. Why listen to my teacher say, come here the first time, when she'll say it 10 more? So it's very hard to get people to listen to themselves. My advice is say it once, maybe twice, and then do something different. Because by repeating, you're not actually helping the situation.
You can give us some tips for to improve the communication between parents and children?
Well, I think all children need to have opportunities to express what they're feeling. And I think it's important that parents talk about feelings as they're happening. So when I see my child be upset or see my child really enjoying something, it's important for parents to say, to describe to the child what's going on. Trying to do it sometime later. How did you feel an hour ago when you were upset? That's difficult for all children. It's much better to do it as immediately as possible. I think it's important for parents to accept the description of those feelings and understand that when I describe my feeling, I'm not necessarily asking you to fix things. It's like sharing information. So if I tell my parent I'm sad, I don't think a parent has to immediately fix it. I'm going to make you happy. It's, well, why you're sad? What's going on? What can you do when you're sad? Many of us want our children never to be sad, never to be upset, but it's a natural part of life and it's an important part of learning to communicate.
You are traveling a lot. You observe that everywhere all the children have the same needs, or they are different? Because we depends of social, geographic context, everything.
Well, for me, the children are very much the same. You know, they play with the same things, they enjoy the same things. The same things are scary. And so I really don't see a big difference in children literally around the world. There are cultural variations, but all parents want to protect their children. All parents want things to be better. So parents need to learn very similar things. In one culture, you know, one view might be, oh, these parents are too strict and too demanding. But in general, no one is strict all the time. When I watch parents, you know, they laugh, they joke, they tease their children, they try to play with them. And the main difference from when children have a disability is the parents can still enjoy all those positive things. You know, it is important to laugh and dance and pick up your child. But then there'll be the responsibility of teaching. That is, I can't just take care of a child. I have to help them grow and learn new skills.
You are a specialist in languages, in communication. How you can describe the word love in this equation? Because I think when we are communicating with and by love, everything changes.
Well, I think, you know, using the word love, it's a different word at different parts of times in our life. I mean, my grandson who's 5 years old, when I kiss him goodnight, I say, you know, I love you. He says, I love you. That's a very different type of word, if you will, than when a teenager, especially if a teenager first falls in love, you know. And I love everybody. I love you, I love you, I love everybody. And then as we become adults, we start to think differently about the word. Oh, it's a much deeper sense of things. It involves trust and anticipation that you will help me. And it's, we use the word at all three ages, but they're really different words, describing different situations.
When I saw in the Center Donorion today those very ill children and the people who take care of them, I saw that the language is love, because they are very close, but when you are coming with love close to them, you feel that something is open, something is more clear. And this is, I think, the most easy way to be close to them and to help them.
Well, I think there, if you will, the expression of love is not just physically feeding somebody and make sure they have clothes and are warm. I mean, that's important, but usually when we see people hugging and touching and picking up and carrying and laughing and doing things together, that's when we said there's a loving relationship. When we go to a restaurant and somebody serves us food, it might be very good food, but rarely do I think the waitress loves me. But my mother can serve a meal, and the way she serves it, the way she interacts with me, the way she talks about the food, that's the part, that's her love for me. Doesn't matter if the food's not as good as the restaurant. It's a different aspect of the interaction. And at the school and where they're taking care of you know, children at home setting, and for the adults, it's the style of interaction that we say, oh, that's a very loving environment.